So let's talk about memory. How does memory work? Not very well for most of us, I suppose. However, there are reasons why we don't remember the things we wish we could remember. We have to think about that a little bit. Why do we remember things? Well, let's talk about when we first learned to read, because reading is how most of us gather information that we need to remember. We study things in school, we read books, and that allows us to read and understand material and to remember it. Now, here's the issue. When we first do learn how to read, we need to recognize that we learned in a certain way. The teacher couldn't have us look at a book and turn pages and know that we actually were able to read. What the teacher had to do was have us open the book, maybe even put our finger on the first line of the page, and then pronounce out loud each of the words in order so that she knew that we knew what the words were when we saw them and how to pronounce them and how to put them together in a sentence. And of course, early reading was very simple. When I was going to school, it was see Dick run, see Jane run, see Spot run. Dick and Jane and Spot all run. And that's how we learned. And we added our additional things that Dick and Jane and Spot could do and gradually learned to put our world in an order that we were able to read and eventually to write. And that's how we learned. Interestingly, when we did that, the teacher made us read aloud. We had to say the words out loud. Over time, most of us learned to say the words silently to ourselves, and then perhaps not to say them at all, just to scan with our eyes and process the information. The interesting thing is that processing the information is very helpful in remembering, because we have to say it. When we say it, we also hear it. And when we look at it, we see it. So our eyes process and store information, our ears process and store information, and the movements of our mouth also, because they have to move in a certain way to pronounce each letter and word, have information that they have stored away. And all of those things are stored in our brain in different ways, auditorily, vocally, and in muscle memory. And that's how we learn. Now, as time goes on, most people learn to read quietly or silently. Some people who don't read perhaps as fast as others still subvocalize. They, under their breath, say the words very quietly as they read. That's not a bad thing. As a matter of fact, if you want to study and learn faster and better, the more ways that you store information at the same time, the better you can remember it. That is why when someone introduces a person to you, if they just say, "This is Jack," That's the only information you get, one auditory sound. However, if you respond and say, "Hello, Jack," then you have processed the word yourself, vocally activated your vocal cords, and have another memory besides hearing it associated with this person that you're looking at. So you see Jack, you hear Jack, and you say Jack. And those memories all occur at almost the same time. And that is how you learn to remember people's names rather than a week later seeing Jack somewhere and saying, "I know him. I've met him. His name is," well, if you didn't say it, you're not going to be able to say it again very easily. If you only heard it once and didn't repeat it and hear it again, then you only have a minimal amount of information. My point is that it's extremely important that we process information in as many ways as possible. So my suggestion is, when we are studying, rather than just scanning the words quickly, where we are very likely not to remember everything we read, it's probably better to process that information in a different way. For example, reading the words from a book, and if you're in a place where it's reasonable to do it, like at home, reading aloud, just like slow readers do, and allowing yourself to see the words, to form the words with your vocal cords and your speech apparatus, and to hear the words. Now you have processed the information at least 3 different ways, and the likelihood that you will remember it is highly increased. In addition to this, if you're studying, and remember, studying is not the same as just reading for pleasure. Studying means you want to remember what you've read. And sometimes the best way to do that, in fact, the best way to remember anything, is to put the information in your own words, your own voice. You will remember better when you use your own voice, hear the sound of your own voice, and process the information visually, auditorily, and vocally all at the same time. It will take longer. It takes longer to read aloud. But you will probably find that what you remember means that you will not have to read silently the same thing 3 or 4 times in order to hopefully remember it. And here's the point. When we are studying, we want to be able to recall the information. The reason we use the term recall is because that word means to call again, recall. If we have not said it aloud the first time, the likelihood that we will be able to recall it is almost 0, because we haven't called it or said it in the first place. Sound reasonable? Well, that's how it works.